Well, g'day curd nerds. Today we're going to learn how to make Montasio. Well, Montasio is an Alpine cheese in the style of, say, Gruyere, that sort of thing. Sometimes it has small eyes, sometimes it doesn't. It's made with unpasteurised cow's milk and sometimes with some goat's milk added. However, it is a DOP cheese, and this is definitely not the DOP version. So to all my Italian viewers out there, please don't flame me in the comments, because this is just a version that I've created myself. So, Montasio. Like I said, Alpine cheese comes from northern Italy, in the foothills of the Alps, and it is for this recipe we've used 50% goat's milk and roughly 50% cow's milk. So it should have a nice piquant flavour when it's mature. It's going to mature over the period of an entire year, so I'm going to have it in the cheese cave, but I'll show you that at the end of the video. Anyway, let's get along and see how we made Montasio. So as you can see there, I'm using 5 litres of goat's milk and 6 litres of cow's milk from Inglenook Dairy. Now you could use just 5 litres of cow's milk and 5 litres of goat's milk, and that would work equally as well. So the ingredients list there, I've got 5 litres of goat's milk or 5 quarts, 6 litres or 6 quarts of unhomogenised cow's milk, a quarter of a teaspoon of thermophilic starter culture, 1.5 milliliter or half a teaspoon of calcium chloride diluted in 60 milliliters of non-chlorinated water, 2.5 milliliters or half a teaspoon of Rennet, liquid Rennet, and that's single strength, diluted in 60 mils of cool non-chlorinated water. And I'm going to be using a saturated brine solution at 18%. So we heat the milk up to the first target temperature of 35 degrees Celsius, which is 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So once we brought that up to temperature, we're going to add the thermophilic starter culture. And I'm adding in a quarter of a teaspoon there. Just sprinkling it all over the top. And because that was the end of the jar, I just knocked it in. I didn't have quite a full teaspoon, a quarter teaspoon there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to, because I know the milk will heat up too much because I got it sitting on top of the heat, I've taken that off the heat now. So allow the starter culture to rehydrate for 5 minutes before we stir it in. So 5 minutes later, I know that the milk's going to start cooling down now, so I put it back on top of my double boiler arrangement there. And what we're going to do next is we're going to start stirring the starter culture into the milk. We're going to mix that in thoroughly. Take your thermometer out as well. And once you've finished stirring in a top to bottom motion, we're going to allow that to acidify now for 40 minutes. Acidify is another word for ripening. Okay, 40 minutes later, some of the cream would have floated to the top, so we've got to give that a little bit of a stir first to mix that back up again. So once you've stirred the cream back into the milk, we're going to add the next ingredient, which is the calcium chloride solution. Now the calcium chloride helps add back insoluble calcium into the milk, and this lets it have a much better curd set. So during pasteurisation, some of the calcium is destroyed. Okay, so we're going to add the rennet to the milk now. And that'll help the milk to set into curds and whey. So we give that a stir for no more than 1 minute. And then we cover it up to make sure no dust or fluff gets into it. And we're going to allow that to set for 40 minutes at 35 degrees Celsius, 95 Fahrenheit. So 40 minutes later, well, first thing we're going to do is check for a clean break. Saw there was a little black thing on top, I got rid of that. Check for a clean break, and that is really good. So if it's not set though for you, then wait another 10 to 15 minutes and then check it again. Right, so I'm going ahead and cutting the curds now using my curd harp. So cut the curds into 0.5 centimetre or 1/4 inch cubes. Should be about pea size, so I'm doing that with the whisk. So I did use my trusty curd cutter to cut it the horizontal cuts. So to make sure they're all an even consistency, I'm using my balloon whisker there just to dab it up and down, and basically that cuts the curds into the desired shape. So we're looking for about pea size. So that's enough. We don't want to fracture the curds. So what we're going to do now is allow those to heal for 5 minutes. So 5 minutes later, we see a little bit of whey on the top, and that's perfectly fine. Now I'll just turn the heat on there, because what we're going to do over the next 40 minutes is we're going to gradually stir the curds gently, and make sure all of the curds are cut, of course, using my balloon whisk again. I'm going to heat that up to 43 degrees Celsius, which is 110 Fahrenheit, over that 40-minute period whilst we're stirring. So we continuously stir so that the curds don't mat together, and we're trying to get them to expel as much whey as we can. So I'm fairly close to 43 there. So I've reached the target temperature, and you can see that the curds have shrunk considerably from the pea size that I originally cut them at to just under the size of, I suppose, half a pea, a split pea. There we go. So we're going to maintain the temperature and stir for another 30 minutes. So 30 minutes later, you'll see that they're now about the size of a plump grain of rice. So fairly small. A lot of whey's been expelled. But remembering we're using half goat's milk here, so we actually do get a little bit better yield than we would if we were using cow's milk alone. So now we're going to remove it from the heat, or turn the heat off, and allow the curds to settle for 5 minutes. So we're going to go over to the sink area now, and we're going to strain or drain through a cheesecloth lined colander. Now you can retain the whey if you like and make all sorts of goodies with it, but I've chosen not to here. So get out every last little grain of curd. Doesn't have to drain for very long. Now we're going to move that over to the side of my sink, and we're going to put that into it's a 6-inch or 165mm basket. So this holds this amount of curds perfectly. So I'm basically trying to get the curds level, and put a fold of the cheesecloth over, put the follower on top, and then we're going to press that at 12 kilograms or 26 pounds of pressure for 1 hour, just to form the rind of the cheese. And there's a fair bit of whey coming out, as you can see there. So 1 hour later, we're going to remove it from the press and the basket. Now be gentle here, because the rind may not have formed properly. It's fairly soft. Now a little bit of it did stick to the cheesecloth, and what I forgot to do was spray the cheesecloth with a bit of vinegar to stop it sticking to it. Now we're going to press at 22 kilograms, 50 pounds for 9 hours now. Okay, so 9 hours later, and for me this was overnight. I'm just going to remove it from the press. Now the rind should definitely be formed, and a fair bit of the whey has been removed from it. But we're going to press it again at 22 kilograms, 50 pounds for another 9 hours. So fold over your cheesecloth, put the follower on top, and then press it down. So I'm using a 50-pound spring, and that closes the spring totally up, and then I know how much pressure I'm applying to the follower. Okay, so after that 9 hours, we're going to remove the cheese from the press again, and we're going to take it out of the mould for the final time. So the rind is definitely formed, it's all good. I'm just picking off any little bits of fluff there. So we're going to place it into an 18% brine solution for 14 hours. And we're going to turn once at the 7-hour mark. So I've got a little bit too much brine in there, so it's well submerged. So that's just at room temperature, you don't need any special temperature there. So once the 14 hours have elapsed, we're going to remove the cheese from the brine and place it onto a draining mat. So I've just got a bamboo chopping board and a bamboo sushi mat there. Then I can air dry it there. Now it was about this time that I discovered that the cheese was covered in fluff, and what had happened is I'd washed it in the washing machine, forgot to take it out, and Kim had run a load of normal clothes through it, so it was covered in little black bits of fluff. So I managed to get most of them off of the cheese. So we're going to air dry that now for 2 to 3 days until it's touch dry. Now, because I didn't want any more fluff on it, I put it under a little umbrella with some, looks like lace, but I don't know what it is, a fly screen. Now we're going to ripen that in a box at 12 degrees Celsius, 54 Fahrenheit, and 85 relative humidity for no less than 6 months for this cheese. Now this Alpine style Montasio can be aged for up to a year for a very strong flavour, but it's definitely edible at about 6 months. So there you go, fairly standard sort of cheese making process, nothing too exciting except just making sure that when you cut the curd, the grains of the curd are about the size of a pea, and they shrink down to about the size of a plump piece of rice, or plump grain of rice. That's the secret behind this cheese, to make sure that you've got enough moisture out of it so it ages well over that 1 year period. So I've got it here on a pine board. Now I'm going to put this pine board and the cheese, of course, into my cheese cave. I'm trying something to get the humidity up. We'll see how that goes, but hopefully I'm going to, at least for the first month, encourage a natural rind, and then after that what I'm going to do is coat it with olive oil, so to give it a even stronger rind, and then from there on we'll see what happens. If it starts to dry out, then I'll resort to vacuum packing, and I'll vacuum pack or wax this cheese, and we'll go along for the 12 months. So during the first week, the first 2 weeks, we turn it every single day to make sure that the fats distribute evenly during the ripening period. And then after that first 2 weeks, then we can turn weekly, and we continue to do that during the entire affinage period. So thanks for watching, Curd Nerds. Appreciate your time as always. Hope you got a fair bit out of that video and saw how simple it was to make Montasio, simple Alpine cheese. Now, if you liked the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, so you can get more cheesy content on a weekly basis. You can buy the ingredients and the kit over at littlegreenworkshops.com.au. Also, don't forget there's the join memberships button and the link to Patreon below. Well, thanks for watching, Curd Nerds, and I'll see you next time.